The rock apes of the jungle, the phantom radios, the vanishing platoons. None of those legends would exist because the men would have been home in Ohio, Texas, and New York. But then, 58,220. That is the count of names carved into the black granite of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. Funny thing is, nearly 40,000 of those names shouldn't be there. And to this day, the military doesn't want the true reason to slip out into the public. In the winter of 1966, the war was at a crossroads. The death toll was still under 10,000. The draft hadn't yet gutted the American heartland. And in the shadows of Saigon, a secret bridge was built. A bridge that could have brought every soldier home by the summer of '67. It was codenamed Operation Marigold. It wasn't a military strike. It was a diplomatic ghost mission. For decades, the details of this failure were buried in classified archives, labeled as a missed opportunity. But when you look at the timing, the precision of the sabotage, it looks less like a mistake and more like a hit job. Tonight, we're opening the Marigold Files to ask the question, who was the real threat in the Vietnam War? Was it the Viet Cong? Or was it our very own military? To understand the hidden truth of Marigold, you have to meet the two men the Pentagon didn't want talking. First, Janusz Lewandowski. He wasn't a soldier. He was a Polish diplomat on the International Control Commission. To the Americans, he was a communist proxy. To the North Vietnamese, he was a trusted ally. Second, Giovanni Dorlandi, the Italian ambassador in Saigon. In June of 1966, these two men did the impossible. They opened a back channel between the White House and Hanoi. This wasn't public theater like the later Paris Peace Accords. This was a clandestine handshake. Lewandowski flew to Hanoi and met with the North Vietnamese leadership. He didn't bring threats. He brought a 10-point proposal from the Americans. And to everyone's shock, Hanoi said yes. They were willing to meet in Warsaw to end the war. At this moment, President Lyndon B. Johnson was being told by his generals that the war was a stalemate. He was desperate for a way out that didn't look like a defeat. Marigold was his golden ticket. But in the shadows of the Pentagon, a different faction was watching. A faction that wasn't ready for the green hell to fall silent. The Marigold Files reveal a plan so practical, it's haunting. Step 1, a total ceasefire. Step 2, the withdrawal of North Vietnamese troops from the south. As the law of cause and effect comes into play, the U.S. would stop the bombing of the North entirely. And if all went well, a coalition government in the South that included the Viet Cong. Hanoi agreed to meet in Warsaw December 5, 1966, to finalize these terms. The Polish government had already prepared the meeting rooms. The world was 72 hours away from the end of the Vietnam War. Imagine the lives that would have been saved. The rock apes of the jungle, the phantom radios, the vanishing platoons. None of those legends would exist because the men would have been home in Ohio, Texas, and New York. But then, the bombs started falling. This is where the hidden truth turns dark. December 2nd, 1966, 3 days before the Warsaw meeting. The U.S. military launched a series of massive airstrikes directly on the city of Hanoi. These weren't tactical strikes on jungle trails. These were bombs dropping near the very embassies where the peace deal was being brokered. Hanoi reacted exactly how any cornered animal would. They viewed the bombings as a double cross. They believed the Americans used the peace talks to lure them into a false sense of security before hitting their capital. Janusz Lewandowski frantically messaged Saigon, "What are you doing? You are burning the bridge." The American diplomats in Saigon were just as confused. They hadn't authorized the strikes. The White House claimed it was a communication error, but the timing was too perfect. Every time a peace meeting was scheduled for Operation Marigold, a new accidental bombing run would occur near Hanoi. By December 15th, Hanoi officially pulled out of the talks. The marigold flower had withered before it could bloom. Because Marigold failed, the war became a zombie war. It was a conflict that was technically dead in 1966, but was forced to keep walking for another 7 years. Without the Marigold peace, we got the 1968 Tet Offensive. We got the Cambodian incursion. We got the Nixon era and the fall of Saigon. The Marigold Files suggest that there was a war party within the U.S. government. Men who believed that a negotiated peace in 1966 was a loss of face. They preferred a decade of carnage over a quiet exit. To this day, the December bombings are officially listed as a tragic coincidence. But in the world of hidden truths, there are no coincidences. There are only operations that succeed and operations that are forced to fail. When news of the December bombings hit the State Department, the reaction wasn't one of military triumph. It was one of pure, unadulterated panic. Nicholas Katzenbach, the Undersecretary of State, was so horrified by the timing of the airstrikes that he began an internal investigation. He wanted to know who cleared these flat paths, why Hanoi, and why now. The official story was that the targets were rail yards and oil depots, but declassified memos from the LBJ library tell a more sinister story. There was a deep rift in the administration. On one side, you had the doves, men like Katzenbach and Ambassador Avril Harriman, who saw Marigold as the only way to prevent a decade of carnage. On the other side, you had the hawks. These were the men in the Pentagon who believed that a negotiated peace in 1966 would embolden the Soviet Union. To them, Marigold wasn't a peace deal. It was a surrender. Historians have since uncovered that the Air Force had been given discretionary targets. This meant that even if the president was talking peace in the morning, a general could order a bombing run in the afternoon without a direct phone call to the Oval Office. Was it a rogue operation? Or was it a silent veto from the military-industrial complex? The Italian ambassador, D'Orlandi, certainly thought so. In his private journals, which wouldn't see the light of day for years, he wrote that he felt he was walking through a hall of mirrors. He believed the American military was actively working against its own State Department. The tragedy of Marigold is the realization that the U.S. government wasn't one entity. It was a house divided, and the side that wanted fire won. Let's bring this back to the ground, back to the men in the green hell. If Operation Marigold had succeeded, the 1967 and 1968 draft calls would have been canceled. Think about the names we discussed in our last episode. Jerry Mad Dog Shriver didn't disappear until 1969. If Janusz Lewandowski had been allowed to finish his meeting in Warsaw, Shriver would likely have finished his tour and been living a quiet life in 1970. The rock ape encounters of 1968, the vanishing platoon in the Central Highlands, all of these cursed mysteries happened in the years after the peace was sabotaged. Operation Marigold was the last best hope for a generation. It was a secret bridge built by a Pole, an Italian, and a handful of Americans who believed that enough blood had been spilled. But as we've seen tonight, bridges in the jungle are easily burned. The hidden truth isn't just about what's lurking in the bushes. It's about the ghost piece that still haunts the archives of the Pentagon. It's about the 40,000 names that shouldn't be on that wall. If you found this investigation helpful, hit the like button. It helps the algorithm show these hidden truths to more people. We are a new channel, and your support is the only way we can keep digging into these classified files. What should we investigate next? The secret gold reserves hidden by the NVA, or the lost CIA files on Project Phoenix? Let me know in the comments below. And remember, the history you were taught is only the history they wanted you to know. Until next time, keep your eyes on the shadows.